They shared the mic, the stage, sometimes even the blood, and it still wasn't enough. 12 R&B legends who bullied, froze out, or destroyed the very bandmates who made them famous. One brother married his best friend's widow. One got voted out by his own group. Number 1 will change how you hear his music forever. Number 12. Diana Ross, 1967. The Supremes were the biggest female group in America, and Motown had just quietly renamed them Diana Ross and the Supremes. For founding member Florence Ballard, that single line on a record label felt like a demotion written in ink. According to Mary Wilson's memoir, Dreamgirl, the group's internal dynamic had already shifted years earlier, with Ross positioned front and center in nearly every photo, every interview, every spotlight moment, while Ballard and Wilson faded into background harmony. Wilson describes rehearsals where Ross reportedly corrected her groupmates' outfits, posture, and even their smiles, treating stage presence as something only she was qualified to police. Ballard, by most accounts a stronger vocalist than Ross in raw power, grew increasingly resentful of being sidelined for a smoother, more commercially polished sound that Motown favored. Reports from the era described tension backstage thick enough that stagehands avoided the dressing room before shows. Ballard's drinking worsened under the pressure, and when Motown finally pushed her out of the group in 1967, insiders close to the situation suggested Ross had quietly backed the decision, unwilling to share a spotlight she'd spent years cultivating as her own. Some accounts go further, alleging Ross lobbied Berry Gordy directly to replace Ballard with Cindy Birdsong rather than work through the group's internal tensions. Ballard herself, in rare interviews before her death, described feeling erased from a group she'd co-founded as a teenager on Detroit's West Side, reduced to a footnote in a story she helped write from its very first rehearsal. She would spend the next decade in and out of poverty, briefly on welfare, dying in 1976 at just 32 of cardiac arrest, largely forgotten by the industry she helped build. Ross, meanwhile, ascended to solo superstardom, her name eventually towering so completely over the group that many younger fans today don't realize the Supremes existed before her. Whether Ross orchestrated Ballard's downfall or simply failed to stop it remains disputed among those who were there. But one thing bandmates from that era agree on: once Diana Ross decided who belonged center stage, everyone else learned to stand exactly where she pointed. It's a pattern that would repeat across the genre for decades, the loudest voice off mic deciding who got heard on it. And the next artist on this list didn't just police his bandmates' spotlight, he policed their bank accounts. Number 11. Frankie Beverly. Frankie Beverly and Maze built a 40-year career on smooth grooves and loyalty. But according to multiple former band members, that loyalty ran in one direction only. Musicians who played behind Beverly for years have described him in interviews as a band leader who ruled rehearsals like a drill sergeant, docking pay or dismissing players outright for mistakes as small as a missed cue or a slightly late entrance. One former member recalled being let go after more than a decade in the band, with no warning and no real explanation beyond Beverly's decision that it was time. Reports from musicians who toured with Maze in the 80s and 90s describe a culture of walking on eggshells, where band members rehearsed obsessively, not out of passion, but out of fear of becoming the next name Beverly quietly dropped from the lineup. Several former players have said contracts and pay arrangements were handled almost entirely on Beverly's terms, with little room for negotiation and even less room for complaint, and that raising a grievance was often treated as a sign a musician was becoming difficult to work with, rather than a legitimate concern worth addressing, unlike flashier scandals involving drugs or violence. Beverly's reported control was procedural and cold, a spreadsheet approach to discipline that left almost no public trace until former players began speaking candidly decades later, long after Mays had already stopped touring regularly. That silence, several musicians have said, was itself part of the culture. Beverly built an unspoken understanding that airing grievances publicly would end a career in session work faster than any missed cue ever could. Fans who saw Mays on stage saw only unity, matching white outfits, tight harmonies, effortless chemistry. Behind that polish, according to those accounts, was an unspoken rule that no one was irreplaceable and everyone was disposable the moment they stopped meeting Beverly's exacting standard. He never faced a headline scandal. He never had a public falling out, captured by tabloids. But the sheer number of musicians who cycled through his band over 4 decades tells its own story, one of quiet, relentless control, dressed up as professionalism. And if Beverly ruled through cold precision, the next name on this list ruled through pure, unpredictable rage.
Here's something most people don't realize. Only about 10% of you watching will hit subscribe. The other 90% just watch and move on. You made it this far, so you're clearly not most people. Hit subscribe. Back to the countdown.
Number 10. Rick James.
She will never let your spirits.
By the early 80s, Rick James was funk royalty, riding the success of Super Freak and living a lifestyle as excessive as his music. But according to former members of his backing band, the Stone City Band, that excess came with a temper that could turn violent without warning. Musicians who worked with James during his commercial peak have described sudden explosions of anger over minor mistakes during rehearsals, incidents that reportedly escalated from shouting to physical altercations backstage. Some band members recalled James's drug use during this period as a direct trigger for his mood swings, turning ordinary tour stops into unpredictable minefields where nobody knew which version of him would show up. Former associates have said,
The boys in the band.
James demanded total loyalty and total control, viewing any pushback from musicians as a personal betrayal
I really love you.
rather than professional disagreement. One musician who toured with him for years described the experience as thrilling and terrifying. In equal measure, the shows were electric, but the hours before and after were governed by James's volatility.
Wild now.
Others recalled being summoned to his hotel room late at night for reasons that had nothing to do with music,
I really like the taste of.
expected to simply be available whenever James decided he needed company or an audience for his moods.
Yeah.
Band members who tried to set boundaries around those demands reportedly found themselves frozen out, sidelined from rehearsals,
Her toenails.
or quietly written out of upcoming tour dates without explanation. By the time his career cooled in the later 80s, several longtime collaborators had quietly walked away,
Everybody sing. Super freak.
unwilling to keep absorbing the unpredictability, trading steady studio work with a funk legend for the simple relief of a calmer, quieter career. James's later, well-documented legal troubles in the 1990s only reinforced what band members had been describing privately for over a decade. A brilliant musician whose control over the people around him relied less on charisma and more on fear. The Stone City Band gave Rick James his sound. According to those who lived it, he rarely let them forget who was in charge of it. And the next artist on this list didn't need anger, he used silence and exclusion as his weapon of choice within the group.
She's a super freak. Super freak.
Number 9. Eddie Kendricks. By the mid-1960s, the Temptations were Motown's flagship male group, 5 voices built to move as one unit on stage and off. But according to several accounts from that era, the group's internal harmony was far shakier than the choreography suggested. And Eddie Kendricks, one of the group's founding members, and its distinctive falsetto lead, was reportedly at the center of much of the friction. Bandmates and Motown insiders have described Kendricks as someone who resented sharing lead vocals, particularly once David Ruffin's rougher, grittier voice began pulling the spotlight away from Kendricks's smoother falsetto style on hits like My Girl.
It's strange, but I wish it would rain.
Rather than address the tension directly, Kendricks reportedly responded with cold silence and subtle exclusion, freezing out bandmates during rehearsals and refusing to collaborate on arrangement decisions unless his preferences were followed exactly. Former group members have said Kendricks would sometimes withhold basic information about schedule changes or promotional appearances from certain bandmates he felt had slighted him, leaving them scrambling and embarrassed in front of Motown executives.
I got tears.
That pattern of quiet exclusion, several accounts suggest, created a lasting sense of mistrust within the group that outlasted any single lineup change, with some members later saying they never fully trusted Kendricks again, even after years of continued touring together. Former Motown staff who worked around the group during that period have described Kendricks as polite and professional in public settings, which made the private freeze-outs all the more disorienting for bandmates who never knew which version of him they'd be dealing with on a given night. When Kendricks himself eventually left the Temptations in 1971 over creative and financial disagreements with the label, some former groupmates reportedly felt more relief than loss, having spent years navigating his moods rather than making music. Unlike the loud public blow-ups that would define other entries on this list, Kendricks's reported behavior operated in the space between songs, in the silences and the excluded conversations, in decisions quietly made to reward loyalty and punish perceived disrespect. It's a quieter kind of control, but former Temptations members have said it was no less exhausting to live inside. Night after night, city after city, tour after tour, and the next artist on this list took that same instinct for control and turned it into open family warfare. Number 8. Bobby Womack. Before Bobby Womack became a solo soul legend, he was one of 5 brothers performing together as the Valentinos, a family group discovered and mentored by Sam Cooke himself in the early 1960s. But according to accounts from within the family, that brotherly bond curdled quickly once success and money entered the picture. Reports describe Bobby, the most talented and most ambitious of the brothers, gradually positioning himself as the group's de facto leader, making decisions about bookings, arrangements, and songwriting credit without consulting the others. When It's All Over Now became a hit for the Rolling Stones after the Valentinos' original version stalled commercially. Disputes over who deserved credit and payment reportedly deepened existing resentment among the brothers, with Bobby positioned to benefit most from the songwriting royalties. Family accounts from later years describe a pattern where Bobby's musical talent and connections, including his close relationship with Sam Cooke, translated into leverage he used to dominate decisions the group was supposed to make together, often presenting choices to his brothers as already settled rather than open for discussion. The brothers' relationship grew more complicated still after Cooke's sudden death in 1964, when Bobby's marriage to Cooke's widow, Barbara, just months after the murder, reportedly created a rift within the family and the group that never fully healed, with some relatives cutting off contact entirely. The Valentinos effectively dissolved not long after, and while Bobby went on to a celebrated solo career built partly on songs and connections forged during those family years, several relatives have described feeling used, sidelined, and ultimately discarded once he no longer needed the group that gave him his start.
Here's another process here.
Bobby Womack would spend decades as one of soul music's most respected voices, but the brothers who stood beside him at the very beginning rarely spoke publicly about those years without noting how quickly family loyalty gave way to ambition. And the next entry on this list wasn't about one dominant voice, it was about an entire group turning on itself from the inside. Number 7. New Edition, Bobby Brown Era. When New Edition formed in Boston in the early 1980s, they were 5 teenagers thrown together into sudden fame. None of them prepared for what came with it. According to accounts from group members published in later years, Bobby Brown, one of the group's most charismatic personalities, quickly became a dominant and often disruptive presence. Someone whose talent was matched by an ego the rest of the group struggled to manage. Fellow members have described Brown as increasingly difficult during rehearsals and tour stops, prone to outbursts when he felt overshadowed, and resistant to sharing spotlight moments, even within a group built entirely on shared harmonies. Management at the time reportedly found Brown difficult to control, and tensions within the group escalated to the point where, according to multiple retellings including the group's own biographical accounts, Brown was voted out by his own bandmates in 1985. A decision made collectively after years of friction that other members said had become unsustainable. That firing, while framed publicly as a mutual parting, was, according to insiders, a direct result of Brown's behavior toward the very group that had raised him from a Boston housing project to national fame. The dynamic didn't end there. Years later, during New Edition's numerous reunion attempts, members have described Brown's continued difficulty integrating back into a group structure, often arriving late, missing rehearsals, or expecting preferential treatment that other members felt undermined the group's unity all over again. What makes this entry different from a typical falling out is the documented pattern, not a single explosive incident, but a repeated cycle across decades where the same dynamic resurfaced whenever Brown rejoined the group he'd once been removed from. Former groupmates have spoken about the emotional toll of essentially firing a childhood friend, and of the awkward reunions that followed. Never quite able to recreate the trust that existed before fame complicated everything, New Edition survived and thrived without him for years. Proof that sometimes bandmates protect themselves by removing the very person audiences came to see. And the next name on this list didn't just alienate one bandmate, he alienated an entire generation of musicians who once called him family. Number 6. Sly Stone. Sly and the Family Stone were revolutionary, not just for their sound, but for their makeup. A racially and gender-mixed band at a time when that was almost unheard of in American popular music. But according to former members, the utopian image the group projected on stage masked an increasingly toxic reality behind it, largely driven by Sly Stone himself. As the band's fame grew in the late 1960s and early 1970s, so did Stone's drug use. And with it, according to multiple bandmates' later accounts, came paranoia, erratic behavior, and a growing pattern of control that left musicians uncertain from day to day whether rehearsals or shows would even happen. Former members have described being kept waiting for hours as Stone remained locked away, unreachable, while the band and crew absorbed the financial and emotional cost of missed obligations. Some accounts describe Stone bringing armed associates around the band, creating an atmosphere of intimidation that longtime members said fundamentally changed the group's internal culture from creative collaboration to something closer to fear-based compliance. Bandmates who had been with Stone since the group's earliest, most joyful years found themselves walking away one by one, unable to reconcile the visionary bandleader they once admired with the increasingly unpredictable figure controlling nearly every aspect of their professional lives. Larry Graham, the group's bassist and a pioneering figure in his own right, eventually departed amid reported tension with Stone that some accounts describe as touching on serious threats, though details remain disputed by those involved. By the mid-1970s, the band that had once embodied unity and boundary-breaking optimism had effectively collapsed, its members scattered, its leader increasingly isolated by the same control he'd once used to hold the group together. Sly Stone's musical legacy remains enormous and undisputed. But according to those who lived through the band's unraveling, the price of that legacy was paid by musicians who gave years of their lives to a vision that ultimately consumed the people inside it. And the next artist on this list turned that same instinct for control into a pattern of behavior his own group eventually couldn't survive either. Number 5. David Ruffin. David Ruffin gave the Temptations one of the most recognizable voices in soul music, but according to extensive accounts from bandmates and Motown insiders, that same voice came attached to an ego the rest of the group increasingly struggled to contain. As My Girl and subsequent hits made Ruffin the group's most visible member. Reports describe him demanding top billing, more money, and preferential treatment that violated the Temptations' founding principle of 5 equal voices sharing one spotlight. Former bandmates have described Ruffin missing rehearsals and shows without warning,
Somewhere there should be,
then reappearing expecting to resume his position as if nothing had happened, leaving the rest of the group to cover for him repeatedly
see,
in front of Motown executives and paying audiences. Tensions reportedly reached a breaking point when Ruffin began insisting the group's billing be changed to credit him individually,
inscribe,
echoing the exact dynamic that had already fractured the Supremes. When Motown and his own bandmates finally moved to fire him in 1968,
and build it high.
accounts from the period describe Ruffin refusing to accept the decision, reportedly showing up uninvited at Temptations concerts and attempting to join the group on stage mid-performance, forcing security to physically remove him in front of stunned audiences on more than one occasion. That pattern continued for months, according to multiple retellings, with Ruffin unable or unwilling to accept that the group he'd helped define no longer wanted him standing among them.
Broken heart.
The remaining Temptations pressed forward, eventually finding continued success with new lead singers, while Ruffin pursued a solo career that never quite recaptured his Temptations-era peak. Former groupmates later reflected that Ruffin's downfall wasn't a lack of talent,
Then inscribe,
but an inability to see himself as one voice among 5, a mindset that turned a group triumph into a one-man crusade that alienated the very people who'd made him a star.
there's a broken heart.
And the next entry on this list wasn't about a group that pushed one member out, it was about a group that nearly destroyed itself from within.
Name it after me, yeah.
Number 4. TLC.
Trying to holler at me.
TLC sold tens of millions of records and defined 90s R&B with a sound built on the tight, three-way chemistry between Tion, T-Boz Watkins, Razonda Chili Thomas, and Lisa Left Eye Lopes. But according to accounts from all 3 members over the years, that chemistry was under sustained internal strain, almost from the start, driven largely by conflict involving Lopes. The group's most publicized moment of internal crisis came in 1994, when Lopes set fire to the mansion of her boyfriend, football player Andre Riessen, during a domestic dispute, an incident that placed enormous strain on the group's finances, reputation, and internal trust at the height of their fame. But according to Watkins and Thomas's later interviews and the group's own documentary retrospectives, the tension went beyond that single incident, describing years of friction over Lopes' unpredictable behavior, her resistance to the group's collective decision-making process, and moments where she reportedly acted unilaterally on business matters that were supposed to involve all 3 members equally. Lopes, for her part, later described feeling unfairly cast as the group's problem member, boxed into a role that made her the target of blame whenever the group's internal dynamics soured, and expressed frustration that her creative contributions were sometimes minimized by bandmates and management alike. Accounts describe a group caught in a genuinely difficult cycle. Real affection and history between the 3 women, layered over real resentment about money, control, and the uneven distribution of blame whenever things went wrong. The group's 1995 bankruptcy filing despite having sold over 10 million albums, added financial pressure that former associates say deepened existing fractures rather than uniting the members against a common problem. Lopes' death in a car accident in 2002 froze the group's unresolved tension permanently, leaving Watkins and Thomas to carry both the group's legacy and the complicated, sometimes painful memory of a partnership that never fully found peace. What makes TLC's story different from other entries here is that no single member functioned purely as an aggressor. According to those closest to the group, all three women were, at different points, both the source and the target of a dynamic none of them ever fully resolved. And that same blurred line between bully and bullied defines the next entry on this list too, one of the most notorious in R&B history. Number 3. Frankie Lymon. In 1955, Frankie Lymon was just 13 years old when Why Do Fools Fall in Love turned him and his backing group, the Teenagers, into overnight sensations. One of the first true teen idols in American pop history. But according to surviving members of the group and decades of later reporting, the record's success set off a pattern of financial and creative exploitation that started inside the group itself before the industry ever got involved. Because Lymon was the lead vocalist and the group's most marketable face, record executives and managers reportedly began funneling credit, royalties, and promotional attention disproportionately toward him. And accounts from surviving Teenagers members describe Lymon doing little to correct the imbalance, instead embracing the solo spotlight at his bandmates' expense. Herman Santiago, who by several accounts actually helped write and originally sing lead on the group's biggest hit, before being replaced by Lymon due to a cracking voice at the recording session, spent much of his life fighting for songwriting credit and royalties that industry records had funneled almost entirely toward Lymon and outside writers instead. Surviving Teenagers members have described watching Lymon go solo just a year after their breakthrough, leaving the group that had performed beside him on some of the biggest stages in the country to fend for themselves without his drawing power or his industry connections. Decades of lawsuits followed among former group members and Lymon's estate, each side battling over royalties from a song that had made millions for record labels. While the surviving Teenagers, according to their own accounts, lived for years without receiving a fair share of the profits their own harmonies had helped create. Lymon himself died of a drug overdose in 1968, at just 25, his solo career having collapsed years earlier, leaving behind a legal and financial mess that outlasted him by decades. The bitter irony former Teenagers members have pointed to again and again is that the song's own lyrics, about love and youthful heartbreak, became a soundtrack to one of doo-wop's longest-running and most painful royalty disputes. One rooted not in outside industry theft alone, but in choices Lymon himself reportedly made as a teenager, suddenly handed more power than he knew how to share. And the next two entries on this list involve control so severe that difficult bandmate barely begins to describe it. Number 2. Ike Turner. Ike Turner's abuse of his wife Tina Turner is among the most widely documented stories in music history, chronicled in her own memoirs and dramatized on screen. But according to numerous former musicians who played in Ike Turner's bands across multiple decades, that same pattern of control and intimidation extended well beyond his marriage and into every corner of his professional operation. Former members of the Ikettes, the rotating group of backing vocalists who toured behind the Turners, have described in interviews a culture of strict rules governing everything from curfews to relationships to appearance, enforced through fines, threats, and, according to some accounts, physical intimidation when Ike felt a rule had been broken. Musicians in his backing band have recounted being fined on the spot for missed notes during rehearsals, sometimes losing entire nights of pay over mistakes that would have been minor infractions in any other touring outfit. Several former band and Ikettes members have described Ike's rehearsals as grueling, marathon sessions that could stretch past midnight, driven less by musical perfectionism than by a need to demonstrate total authority over everyone in the room. Turnover within his organization was reportedly constant, with musicians and singers cycling in and out over the years, many leaving quietly and never speaking publicly about their time with him until decades later. When a wave of interviews and documentaries finally gave former Ikettes and band members space to describe what touring with Ike Turner had actually been like behind the glamour of the stage show. What emerges from those accounts isn't just the story of one abusive marriage, but a broader pattern, an entire organization run on fear, where the same control Ike exercised over Tina extended outward to nearly everyone who depended on him for a paycheck. It's a sobering reminder that the abuse most publicly documented in music history was, according to those closest to it, only the most visible part of a much larger pattern. And that brings us to number 1. An artist whose treatment of his own band was so systematic, so relentlessly documented by the very musicians who lived through it, that it became legendary in its own right. Number 1. James Brown. James Brown didn't just lead his band. According to decades of accounts from the musicians who played behind him, he ran it like a military unit, with a strict code of conduct and a system of on-the-spot fines that became one of the most notorious disciplinary systems in American music history. Fred Wesley, Brown's longtime trombonist and band leader, and Maceo Parker, his celebrated saxophonist, have both described in later interviews and memoirs a culture where fines were issued for scuffed shoes, wrinkled uniforms, missed dance steps, or a single flat note, sometimes deducted directly from a musician's pay before he'd even left the stage. Brown reportedly tracked these infractions obsessively, sometimes flashing hand signals mid-performance to indicate a fine was coming, turning live shows into a kind of ongoing surveillance operation where band members had to play flawlessly while also watching for their band leader's next signal of displeasure. Bootsy Collins, who joined Brown's band as a teenager alongside his brother Catfish, later described the experience as simultaneously the greatest music education of his life and one of the most psychologically demanding jobs imaginable. With Brown's discipline creating a level of precision the band could never have achieved through encouragement alone. Several musicians have recounted incidents where disagreements escalated beyond fines entirely, describing confrontations and, according to some accounts, physical altercations when tempers flared during the exhausting one-nighters that defined Brown's relentless touring schedule. The turnover in Brown's bands over his decades-long career was significant, with celebrated musicians repeatedly leaving amid pay disputes and exhaustion, several of them going on to found their own influential groups, partly as a reaction against the control they'd lived under. And yet almost every musician who has spoken about their time with James Brown, even while describing the fear and the fines in vivid detail, has also credited him with making them into far better musicians than they ever thought possible, a complicated legacy of brilliance and control that neither the band members nor music history have ever fully untangled. James Brown built the tightest band in soul music history. According to the men who lived inside that discipline every night, the cost of that tightness was a fear they carried with them long after they'd left his stage for good.